Bill Nye Saves the World, Season 1, Episode 9 is about
sexual intercourse.
Ugh. Luckily, no, not that. It's not listening to Bill Nye describe sexual intercourse. Nothing nearly as disgusting as that.
My vagina has its own voice.
Well, you know what, let's just start over. Bill Nye Saves the World, Season 1, Episode 9 is about Bill talking about the sexual spectrum. Bill advances what I'll characterize as the gender studies version of sexuality. It's complicated, there's a spectrum, different facets. Don't worry, we'll get into it. Before we do though, I want to talk a bit about Bill's social agenda in this episode. I want to warn you that I'm reaching into conspiracy theory a little bit. I can't support this idea completely with the video, but I'll just tell you what I think is happening here. Bill and the alt-left in general want to legitimize pseudo-academic fields like gender studies.
Now, if they say, well, look, we're doing real science and you guys aren't, that's white, male, sexist, bourgeois, whatever the answer is.
In order to take over academia and tell people what they can or can't say or think. Once they have control in academia, they expect their control to permeate the corporate and political world as well. Like I said, this conclusion overreaches the evidence on offer in this episode of Bill Nye Saves the World. It's just my best guess for why Bill would push this weird and incorrect science that we're about to see onto his audience. Speaking of science, this episode is not that heavy on science, but Bill's got some good reasons. He's got to talk about K-pop,
androgynous,
show cartoons,
cool,
and have a little song and dance. Where would he find the time to talk about science? I mean, what could he possibly cut from this packed agenda? When Bill does foray into the field of science, he makes a few mistakes. I'll point out three that stuck out to me. First, early in the episode, Bill talks about how biological sex is on a spectrum, by which he means that some people have an unusual set of sex chromosomes. Bill describes it.
There's a variety in chromosomes. And like I said, there are sex chromosome abnormalities in 1 in 400 pregnancies. I mean, that is pretty frequent.
But yeah, 1 in 400 is pretty rare. This statistic is deceptive in two ways. First, Bill says,
sex chromosome abnormalities in 1 in 400 pregnancies. 100 pregnancies.
Now, I'm not sure if that's true or not, so let's look at the science. This is a report on genomics from the World Health Organization. Link in description. Quote, Anueploidy is the condition of having less than or more than the normal diploid number of chromosomes. Anueploidy occurs in at least 5% of all pregnancies and is the most commonly recognized chromosome abnormality in humans. Divergence from the normal number of X and Y chromosomes, called sex chromosome aneuploidy, SCA, accounts for approximately half of all chromosomal anomalies in humans, with a total frequency of 1 in 400. The report continues. It is estimated that 1 in 3 miscarriages is due to aneuploidy affecting the fetus. Now, some math seems off here in the report. From that first quote, aneuploidy happens in 5% of pregnancies, and half of aneuploidy is sex aneuploidy. So sex aneuploidy should occur in approximately 2.5% of pregnancies. But that's 1 in 40, not 1 in 400. Either this is a calculating error on the report's part, and sex aneuploidy is an order of magnitude more common than Bill thought, or 1 in 400 is the correct figure, in which case it is only the correct figure in pregnancy. But miscarriages terminate a significant percentage of those pregnancies. Miscarriages are relatively common, and 1/3 of all miscarriages occur in the relatively rare case of sex aneuploidy, according to this report. What this means is, if Bill is right and different sex chromosomes occur in 1 in 400 pregnancies, that's misleading you into thinking that 1 in 400 people have different sex chromosomes. The second way Bill's statistic is deceptive is that he just says 1 in 400 isn't that rare, but it is. That means that 99.75% of pregnancies have the standard sex chromosome arrangement. Let's take a look at a different source, an article published by the National Health Institute on Klinefelter Syndrome. Klinefelter is when a male has at least one extra X chromosome. It is, quote, the most common disorder of sex chromosomes in humans, with prevalence of 1 in 500 males. Other sex chromosomal aneuploidies have also been described, although they are much less frequent, with XXYY and XXXY being present in 1 per 17,000 to 1 per 50,000 male births. The incidence of XXXXY is 1 per 85,000 to 100,000 male births. End quote. The reason I'm giving you these figures is because I want to paint for you the picture that Bill Nye doesn't want to paint. Biological sex isn't really a spectrum that we are all smoothly distributed across, like Bill suggests. Instead, there are two typical configurations of the sex chromosomes, male and female. The vast majority of the population is in one of these two configurations, and then there are a few atypical configurations. Calling this a spectrum is wrong. If you get an extra X chromosome, that won't make you more feminine. It'll give you developmental problems, speech and language deficits, make you infertile, and cause you to have smaller testes. Your symptoms may vary. That's because getting an extra chromosome isn't shifting you along a gradient between male and female. It's a biological disorder, and now your genes are broken and function worse. Bill also talks about the lack of difference in the male and female brain.
Turns out you can't identify the gender of a brain just by looking at it.
And he's wrong, because of course he is. Let's go to the UK and look at sex differences in the brain from a study on 5,216 brain scans. In a single scanner sample of over 5,000 participants from UK Biobank, we mapped the brain regions in which sex differences in volume, surface area, cortical thickness, diffusion parameters, and functional connectivity were found. One main theme of the neurostructural results was that associations with sex were global. Men generally had larger volumes and surface areas, whereas females had thicker cortices. The differences were substantial in some cases, such as total brain volume, more than a standard deviation. We also found that volume and surface area mediated nearly all of the small sex difference in reasoning ability. End quote. Let's look at some pretty graphs, because I don't want to oversell the differences. There is a lot of overlap on measurements of the male and female brain. If you were given a brain and asked to find the gender of that brain's body, you could measure these different attributes and find where those measurements fall on these graphs. A lot of the time, your measurement would fall in an overlapped area. But in some measurements, and there are quite a few, it wouldn't. If your brain typically measured in the pink, you've got a girl brain. In the blue, it's a boy. If you had a measurement for each attribute, you could also apply Bayes' theorem and calculate robust probabilities for male versus female brains. Bill simplifies things way too far when he says that there aren't differences in the male and female brain, or that you wouldn't be able to tell the gender by looking. He wouldn't be able to tell you the gender, but a scientist could. My point with this criticism is that he's not doing science. He's not reading basic research. From the same paper, quote, "Basic sex differences in human brain structure are well known. For instance, males have on average higher total brain volume than females." End quote. Well known. These are well-known differences that Bill is ignoring. Male brain larger, Bill. And this is the science guy? Use Google. Link in description. I'm running a bit long in this section, so I'm not going to go into too much depth here, but I want to call this out, as the question is not nearly as settled as the anthropologist and two nodding heads would like you to believe.
Is there such a thing as a gay gene?
No.
There's no such thing. People have studied it, they've tried to sort it out.
There are a ton of studies on this, drawing mixed conclusions. But the point is, it isn't settled science, and it's dishonest of Bill Nye to represent it, or allow it to be represented as if it were. How about some basic fact check? Bill Nye is wrong on the science, and there's not even that much science in this episode. It's mostly filler and sanctimonious preaching about sexuality. He's also wrong on the social message. But before I get to that though, I want to cover one point. Transgendered people have a higher than average suicide rate. This is from a Williams Institute study for the American Institute for Suicide Prevention. 38 to 44% of transgender people attempt suicide. Compare that to 4.1% of the general population attempting suicide. Trans people are more than 9 times as likely to attempt suicide. In this table, we can also see that interventions like counseling, hormone therapy, or even surgery don't improve the suicide rate, and in fact, in most cases, actually make it worse. Suicide is not the culmination of a happy life. If you attempt suicide, it's probably not because things are going so well for you and you're enjoying your life so much. The suicide rate is a key performance indicator for the life quality experienced by trans people, and what we see is that it is indicating a poor life quality for transgendered people. This is going to come up again later, and I'll want to call these ideas back to your mind, so I'll prompt you with this sound effect. When I play that sound, think back to the negative implications of being transgender. Bill has a cartoon on his show featuring talking ice cream with funny voices.
Also be vanilla.
Because this is a kid's show.
Versatile love may have some butt stuff.
Oh right, it's not. Well, I guess it's because he thinks his audience have the minds of children?
Can dare I say it? Save the world.
Yeah, that's it. This cartoon is hypocritical. The cartoon features vanilla, a stand-in for conventional sexuality, and a host of other ice cream flavors, a stand-in for non-conventional sexuality. The cartoon begins with,
I feel that I am the most natural of the ice creams, and therefore the rest of you should just go ahead and also be vanilla.
That lame vanilla, always trying to convert the non-vanilla flavors. The other ice cream are upset that vanilla is calling them unnatural and trying to change their behavior. The cartoon ostensibly shows us what a naive and obnoxious effort it is to convert another ice cream's flavor. And yet, by the end of the cartoon, the other ice creams are successfully changing vanilla.
It's good.
It's like, giddy up.
Meet you at the bowl.
If it's wrong for vanilla to try and convert strawberry, it must also be wrong for strawberry to try and convert vanilla. In other words, if you don't want me to tell you not to be a gay pansexual wood sprite, don't tell me not to be a straight cisgender male. Actually, this episode seems like it is trying to convince you to change your sexuality.
Sexuality's a spectrum, everyone is on it. Even you might like it if you sit up on it. Drag queen, drag king, just do what feels right.
A more apt interpretation of the ice cream cartoon would be to understand Bill Nye and Friends as vanilla. Nye is the weirdo lecturing you with bad science and feelings and trying to persuade you to change your sexual orientation because he feels gay, pansexual, transgender orgies are natural. This interpretation of the cartoon also conveys that the vast majority of humans are not like Bill Nye. Most people are cisgendered, monogamous heterosexuals who are, or should be, annoyed by Bill Nye's weird sexual evangelizing. When it comes to sexual orientation, that is, who you are or aren't attracted to, I agree with Bill. We shouldn't care, not even if someone is so perverse and degenerate that they, heaven forbid, identify as the same sex they were born with and are attracted to the opposite sex. That's your business. Some of these issues, like variation in biological sex, are medical disorders that require care and intervention. We should care about these to the same extent that we should care about other congenital defects. What Bill calls presentation, which is how you choose to display your gender to the world, and is the category in which transgender people show variance, I think we should also care. In recent years, transgender prevalence is rising. That may be because of efforts to normalize or popularize it. Trans people are being celebrated in the media for transitioning or being public about their transition. I'm not suggesting that we should stigmatize transgender people. The evidence shows that these people have been dealt a very rough hand, and many of them are struggling. In fact, discrimination contributes to their high suicide rate. Basic human compassion requires that we care and comfort people who are laid low through no fault of their own. However, what I am suggesting is that we not glorify or encourage people to become transgender, especially children. There is a real cost to being transgender, and that cost is paid in significantly shorter lifetimes and degraded quality of life. In the show, Bill talks to a panel of experts. These experts consist of an anthropologist, a gender studies professor, and a...
Solomon Giorgio, you are a comedian.
Yes.
And you do bits about being gay.
All the time.
I guess nobody thought about asking a biologist, pediatrician, or psychiatrist. The panel is fairly typical from what I've seen. Everyone agrees with each other and with Bill Nye's take on the topic. I get that Bill needs his panel to be entertaining, and I realize that Bill is saying this line with some irony.
Just tell you guys, on this episode, we have the panel of, I think, the world's foremost authorities. We're here to discuss the hard questions. Solomon Giorgio, you are a comedian. You are a comedian. I think the world's foremost authorities. You are a comedian. I think the world's foremost authorities. You are a comedian.
Yes.
But why are you making this joke? Like, I get it, you don't have anyone with relevant credentials on to talk about the science on your science show, and that's kind of funny, but why don't you have anyone with relevant credentials on? One panel member tells this story.
Woman comes up and she says, "Oh my God, she's so beautiful." And I'm like, "Thank you so much." And then I say, "Hey, Caleb, you want to get that right there?" Doing his goo goo gaga thing. And she's like, "Oh my God, I didn't know he was a boy. I'm so sorry." And I said, "I don't know that he's a boy either."
First, why are you asking a 3-year-old to go get you Pop-Tarts off a shelf?
Your old son, right?
Are you sure this happened? Are you sure it didn't not happen? Are you sure you aren't just making it up? Second, there are serious reasons that I've already covered for not wanting your child to grow up to be transgender or the child's life. This is similar to saying, I don't know my kid won't grow up to hate his life and kill himself. It's technically true, but you shouldn't be so blasé about it. Throughout this episode, Bill and his guests try to normalize the gender studies view on sexuality. Usually, I leave the science alone and criticize the social messaging in Bill's show. In this episode, the science was so poor and so intertwined with the social messaging that I had to delve into the science a bit. One trend is consistent across Bill Nye episodes. This is, Bill pretends to be a scientist in order to deliver his social message. In this episode, he didn't do nearly enough reading, and he got some basic facts wrong in his haste to promote sexuality as a spectrum. My best explanation for why Bill would push this stuff is that he is politically aligned with the people who push this kind of thing professionally, i.e. gender studies departments. These alt-left individuals want to promote their own field, where they can obsess over sexual predilections and call people sexists or whatever phobic and get paid by universities to do so. Bill is playing along because he's on the left as well and he wants his allies strengthened. Or maybe it's because he thought it would be controversial and get attention for his show. Or maybe he just doesn't do any research at all for his shows and someone just dropped this episode in his lap and he ran with it. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by clicking the like button. For my next video, I'll either continue with Bill Nye episodes or present my research on immigration in Sweden. If you have a preference, let me know in the comments. I'll do whatever has the most support in the comment section at the time I sit down to do the next video. Please also give me a comment to let me know what you think about the amount of reference material in this video. Am I spending too much time in the scientific papers? Just right? Not enough. Thanks for your time.